Welcome! You found your way to the quiet shelf, a gentle place where nothing needs to be hurried and nothing needs to be solved. These stories are not meant to surprise you. They are not meant to wake you up or pull you forward. They are here simply to keep you company as your mind begins to slow and your body settles into rest. You can listen closely if you like, or you can let the words drift past you. Like soft background sounds. There is no right way to be here. Each story is short and calm, designed to be easy to follow, and just as easy to let go of. If you fall asleep, the stories will continue quietly on their own. If you stay awake, they will remain gentle and unhurried. You don't need to remember anything. You don't need to stay focused. You don't need to reach the end. Simply get comfortable. Allow the room around you to grow quiet. Let your breathing slow naturally. And when you're ready, we'll begin. The lamp that stayed on. In the quiet corner of the room, beside the window, there was a small lamp that stayed on every night. It wasn't a bright lamp. It didn't try to fill the whole room with light. It simply offered a gentle glow, soft and warm, like a steady breath. When evening arrived, the house would begin to settle. Sounds became smaller. The last footstep moved down the hallway. Cups were rinsed. Curtains were drawn halfway, not to block the night, but to make the room feel tucked in. And then the lamp would click on. Its light touched the edges of things, the curve of a chair, the corner of a bookshelf, the quiet shape of a blanket folded neatly. It made the room look kinder, familiar, safe. Outside the window, the sky deepened into dark blue. A few stars appeared, one by one, like tiny reminders that the world could be calm. Sometimes a car passed in the distance. Sometimes the wind moved through the trees so gently it barely made a sound. The lamp didn't react to any of it. It simply stayed on. It was the kind of light that didn't demand anything. It didn't say, "Stay awake." It didn't say, "Hurry." It didn't say, "Do more." It just quietly suggested, "You can rest now." If someone woke in the middle of the night, they didn't need to reach for a harsh ceiling light. They didn't need to feel startled by brightness. The lamp was already there, offering the same soft glow as before, like it had been keeping watch, not in an anxious way, but in a gentle way. A steady companion, a little warmth in the dark. And as the hours passed, the room grew even quieter. The shadows softened. The corners of the house seemed to relax. The lamp remained, patient and calm, until the first hint of morning light began to appear. When dawn finally arrived, the lamp didn't seem disappointed. It had done what it always did. It stayed on through the night. It made the dark feel gentle. And now, as the room grows quiet again, you can imagine that soft light nearby, warm, steady, and safe, as you drift into rest. A quiet cup of tea. The cup sat on the table exactly where it had been placed, steam rising slowly into the still air. It was the kind of tea meant for evenings. Nothing bold, nothing sharp, just something warm, something gentle, something that didn't ask questions. The room around it was calm. A chair rested nearby. A book lay closed, its pages no longer needing to be turned. The day had already been handled. There was nothing left to solve. The tea cooled gradually, as all good things do, when they are allowed to take their time. Each small curl of steam lifted upward and disappeared, as if the air itself was taking slow, quiet breaths. The cup remained steady, comfortable in its place, holding warmth without urgency. When the first sip was taken, it wasn't rushed. It never was. The cup was lifted carefully, both hands wrapped around it, feeling the heat through the ceramic. The tea tasted soft, almost familiar, like something remembered rather than discovered. Outside, the light had faded into evening. The sky was no longer bright, but not yet fully dark. The world paused in that gentle space between. With each sip, the day loosened a little more. There was no need to check the time, no reason to hurry toward the next moment. The tea didn't mind waiting. It didn't mind being held quietly or set down again to cool. The room seemed to respond to this unhurried pace. Shadows softened. Sounds became distant. Even thoughts slowed, drifting by like leaves on calm water. Eventually, the tea reached the perfect temperature. Not too hot, not too cool, just right. And when the last sip was taken, there was no feeling of loss, only completion. The empty cup stayed where it was, peaceful and still, having done exactly what it was meant to do. It had offered warmth. It had offered pause. It had marked the gentle closing of the day. And now nothing more was needed. The evening could continue quietly. The room could rest. And you could rest too, as if holding that same warm cup, letting everything slow and drift into calm. The house that listened. This house had learned something important over time. It had learned how to listen. During the day, it listened to footsteps moving from room to room. It listened to doors opening and closing, to quiet conversations, to the soft clink of dishes being set down. None of the sounds stayed for long. The house simply noticed them, then let them pass. By evening, the listening became gentler. The floors no longer echoed. The walls seemed to lean inward slightly, as if settling themselves. The windows reflected the dim light inside, holding it carefully. The house didn't rush the quiet. It allowed it to arrive naturally. When someone sighed at the end of the day, the house heard that too. It understood what that sound meant. It had heard it many times before. It knew it was the sound of letting go. The furniture stayed exactly where it was, offering familiar comfort. The air grew warmer, calmer. Even the shadows seemed to soften, stretching lazily across the walls. Outside, night moved in slowly. A breeze passed by, brushing against the house without urgency. The house listened, but didn't react. It had learned that not every sound required attention. As the hours passed, silence became deeper, but not empty. It was a full kind of silence, a quiet that felt held. If someone turned in their sleep, the house noticed and kept still. If the clock ticked once or twice, the house let the sound fade on its own. Nothing felt sharp. Nothing felt sudden. The house had learned how to hold moments gently. And when everything finally became still, the house listened to that too, the deep quiet of rest. It listened without judgment, without expectation, just presence. The house would continue listening through the night, the same way it always did, not watching, not waiting, simply being there, and knowing that this was enough. As you imagine that steady listening space, you can let yourself rest too, knowing you are held gently by the quiet and by the night. Rain on the windowsill. The rain began without announcement. One moment the air was still, and the next, small drops tapped softly against the window. Not loudly, not insistently, just enough to be noticed. The windowsill caught each sound gently, turning it into a steady rhythm. Tap, pause, tap. The kind of rhythm that didn't need to be followed, only heard. Inside, the room remained warm and dry. The rain stayed where it belonged, outside, doing its quiet work. Drops slid slowly down the glass, leaving thin, wandering lines behind them. Some met other drops and joined together, becoming heavier before drifting downward again. Others stayed alone, taking their time. The rain didn't hurry. It fell the same way it always had, patient and calm, without needing attention or praise. It wasn't trying to wash anything away. It was simply being rain. The sound filled the space in a gentle way, smoothing out sharp thoughts and softening the edges of the evening. It made the world feel smaller, closer, more contained. The room seemed to lean into the sound. The chair stayed still. The light remained warm. Even the air felt quieter, as if listening along. Outside, the street faded into a blur of shadow and reflection. Inside, everything stayed clear and steady. Eventually, the rain slowed. The tapping became lighter, more spaced out. A final few drops rested on the sill before slipping away. What remained was a deeper quiet than before. The kind of quiet that feels refreshed, cleansed, ready for rest. And as the rain finished its gentle work, the room held on to that calm, letting it linger. You can imagine that soft rhythm fading now, leaving behind a peaceful stillness where nothing needs to move, and you can drift easily into rest. The long way home. There was a path that didn't appear on any map. It wasn't the fastest way, and it wasn't meant to be. It curved gently instead of cutting straight through. It lingered where other paths hurried past. This was the long way home. The road was quiet, softened by time and use. It welcomed slow footsteps and unhurried thoughts. There were no signs telling anyone to move faster, no markers counting distance, just the steady feeling of moving forward without pressure. Along the way, familiar details appeared. Trees that leaned slightly toward the path, fences worn smooth by years of wind and weather, stones that had settled into the ground exactly where they belonged. Nothing changed quickly here. Each step felt easy. The ground was steady, the air cool and calm. Even the light seemed patient, stretching out the last moments of the day. There was no rush to arrive. Home wasn't going anywhere. With every step, the noise of the day grew quieter. Conversations faded. Lists and plans loosened their hold. Thoughts slowed until they became gentle and wide, like the open sky above. Sometimes the path dipped slightly, sometimes it rose, but never sharply. It allowed the body to move naturally, the breath to find its own rhythm. This road didn't ask for attention. It simply offered space. By the time the first warm lights appeared in the distance, there was already a sense of arrival. Not at a place, but at a feeling of being finished for the day. When the door finally came into view, it felt familiar and kind. There was no urgency to open it, just the quiet knowledge that rest was waiting on the other side. And even as the journey ended, the calm of the long way home stayed. It settled in gently. It stayed. You can imagine yourself walking that path now, step by step, unhurried, until rest feels close, and you drift peacefully into sleep. The night train with no rush. The train moved through the night without hurry. Its rhythm was steady and familiar, a gentle sound that blended into the dark. The wheels followed the tracks patiently, never rushing toward the next place. Inside, the lights were dim. Seats were comfortable, worn smooth by countless quiet journeys. No one spoke loudly. There was no need. Outside the windows, the world passed slowly. Soft shapes of trees, distant lights, wide stretches of darkness that felt calm rather than empty. This train wasn't running late. It wasn't early either. It was exactly on time. The gentle sway of the car made everything feel easier. Thoughts settled into the rhythm. Breathing matched the movement without effort. There were no announcements calling for attention, no urgency in the air, just the steady understanding that the train would arrive when it arrived. Time felt different here. Minutes stretched comfortably. Hours felt light. The destination mattered less than the quiet movement through the night. Somewhere down the car, a door closed softly. Somewhere else, someone shifted in their seat. The sounds blended into the hum of the train, becoming part of the calm. The windows reflected the inside light faintly, like small reminders of warmth traveling through the dark. As the train continued, the outside world grew quieter. Even the passing lights became fewer, spaced farther apart. Eventually, the night felt wide and gentle, and the train kept moving, unbothered by distance or time. A slow journey, a steady path, a peaceful ride. You can imagine yourself on that train now, rocking gently, carried forward without effort, as the night holds you, and rest comes naturally. The softest morning. Morning arrived without any need to announce itself. There was no sudden brightness, no sharp sound to signal the change. Instead, light appeared slowly, like a gentle idea forming. It slipped quietly through the window and rested on the walls. The room stayed still. The air felt fresh, untouched by hurry. Even the sounds outside seemed to know to keep their distance. If a bird sang, it did so softly. If a breeze passed by, it moved carefully. This was the softest kind of morning. The light grew warmer as it settled in, touching familiar shapes, the edge of the bed, the curve of a chair, the quiet surface of the floor. Nothing needed attention yet. Everything could wait. Time felt generous. There was no rush to get up, no list waiting to be followed. The morning held itself gently, allowing space for slow breaths and lingering rest. The room seemed to stretch comfortably, waking without effort. Shadows shifted slightly, then stayed where they were. The day hadn't fully begun, and it didn't need to. Outside, the sky held a pale glow, calm and steady. Inside, the quiet remained unbroken. This kind of morning didn't ask for plans. It simply offered presence. Eventually, warmth settled into the space, wrapping everything in a sense of ease. The moment felt complete, even before anything happened. And if sleep still lingered, that was fine too. The softest mornings understood that rest didn't end just because light arrived. You can imagine that gentle light now, resting around you, warm and unhurried, as you remain comfortably at ease, drifting softly between rest and calm. Footsteps in the hallway. The footsteps were quiet and familiar. They moved slowly down the hallway, not trying to be heard, not trying to be hidden, just a gentle sound, steady and soft against the floor. The hallway held the sound carefully, letting it echo once, then fade. The walls didn't rush it along. They allowed it to linger just long enough to feel reassuring. There was no hurry in the movement. Each step arrived calmly, then passed, leaving the space a little quieter than before. Lights along the hallway were low, casting soft shadows that stretched lazily across the floor. Doors remained closed, comfortable in their places. Nothing stirred. The footsteps continued, unhurried, moving past familiar doorways, past rooms filled with rest. They didn't interrupt the night. They belonged to it. Soon the sound grew softer, more distant. The steps turned a corner, or perhaps simply slowed, until they blended into silence. What remained was a deeper calm. The hallway returned to stillness, holding the memory of the sound without clinging to it. The air settled. The space felt complete again. Nothing needed to follow. The night resumed its quiet rhythm, as steady as before. The hallway rested, knowing the footsteps would return another time, just as gently. You can imagine that sound fading now. Footsteps growing quieter, until only stillness remains, and you drift easily into rest. The book with no ending. The book rested open on the table, exactly where it had been left. Its pages were soft and well-worn, turning easily beneath the fingertips. There was no bookmark, because there was no need to keep track of where the story might end. This book didn't hurry toward a conclusion. Each page flowed gently into the next, like a quiet stream moving through familiar land. The words didn't build toward excitement or tension. They simply existed, calm and steady, offering one moment at a time. The room around the book felt peaceful. The light was low, warm enough to read without effort. Shadows gathered comfortably along the edges of the walls. As the pages turned, time softened. There was no pressure to finish a chapter, no reason to read just one more page. The story would still be there later, unchanged. Sometimes the reading slowed. Sometimes it paused entirely. The book didn't mind. It waited patiently, open and inviting. The words felt familiar, even when they were new. They carried a sense of continuity, as if the story had always been unfolding and always would. Eventually, the book was gently closed, not because it was finished, but because rest had arrived. The cover met the pages quietly, holding the story inside without ending it. The table held the book steady, the room stayed calm. The story continued, just not on the page anymore. You can imagine that book now, always open somewhere, never ending, waiting softly, as your thoughts slow and rest settles in, page by page, into sleep. A garden after sunset. After the sun slipped below the horizon, the garden changed its rhythm. The bright colors softened first. Greens deepened. Petals folded inward slightly, as if settling themselves for the night. The air cooled just enough to feel refreshing. Nothing moved quickly. The garden didn't rush into darkness. It welcomed it slowly, allowing shadows to stretch comfortably across the paths and beds. Leaves grew still. Stems rested. A light breeze passed through, brushing gently against the plants. It carried the faint scent of earth and greenery, calm and familiar. The garden listened. Insects quieted. The last birds found their places to rest. Sounds became fewer, spaced farther apart, until silence felt natural rather than empty. The soil held the warmth of the day, releasing it slowly. Roots rested beneath the surface, steady and unseen, continuing their quiet work without effort. Moonlight began to appear, soft and pale, touching the edges of leaves and stones. It didn't try to illuminate everything, only enough to make the garden feel present. Paths curved gently through the space, leading nowhere in particular. There was no destination here, just rest. The garden remained exactly as it was meant to be, calm, balanced, complete. Even in stillness, it felt alive. You can imagine standing there now, surrounded by that quiet growth, breathing in the cool evening air, letting your thoughts settle as the garden rests and you drift gently into sleep. The clock that forgot time. The clock hung quietly on the wall, its hands moving so slowly they were almost unnoticeable. At some point in the evening, it seemed to forget what it was meant to measure. The ticking softened, blending into the background until it was no longer something to follow. The clock still worked, still moved, but time no longer felt important. The room noticed the change. Moments stretched comfortably. Minutes lost their edges. The space felt wider, calmer, as if it had been given permission to slow down. The clock didn't mind. Its face reflected the warm light nearby, numbers resting gently in place. The hands continued their steady path, but without urgency. No one checked the time anymore. There was nowhere else to be. Outside, the night deepened. Inside, the room stayed calm, held together by quiet and soft light. The clock remained on the wall, content to exist without being counted. It understood that some evenings weren't meant to be measured. Eventually, even the idea of time drifted away. There was only the room, the quiet, and the steady feeling of rest. The clock continued its slow movement, unnoticed and unbothered. You can imagine that sense of time easing now, slipping gently into the background, leaving only stillness as you rest comfortably without counting anything at all. A light in the upstairs window. The light in the upstairs window glowed softly against the dark. It wasn't bright enough to shine far, but it didn't need to. It was steady, warm, and exactly where it belonged. From outside, it looked like a quiet signal, nothing urgent, nothing demanding, just a gentle presence against the night. Inside the room was calm. Curtains rested halfway open. The air felt settled, as if everything had already found its place for the evening. The light stayed on without flicker or change. It didn't rush to turn off. It didn't worry about how long it had been glowing. Below, the house rested. Walls held warmth. Floors were still. The night moved slowly around it all. The light seemed to say that someone was home, even if no one was awake. It offered reassurance without words. As the hours passed, the glow softened even more, blending into the quiet of the night. Outside, sounds faded. Inside, thoughts did, too. The light remained. Eventually, it no longer stood out at all. It became part of the darkness, part of the calm, and that was enough. You can imagine that warm light now, glowing gently nearby, steady and calm, as you feel safe and drift peacefully into rest. The sound of pages turning. The sound was soft and familiar. A page lifted, paused for just a moment, and then turned. It made a gentle whisper as it settled into place, like a quiet breath. There was no rush to read faster. No need to reach the end of the chapter. Each page arrived when it was ready. The book rested comfortably in open hands. Its weight felt reassuring, steady. The pages moved easily, worn smooth by time and use. The room listened to the sound without interruption. The light nearby stayed warm and low, casting a calm glow across the words and the space around them. Between each page turn, there was a pause. A moment of stillness, a chance for the words to sink in and then drift away. Thoughts slowed with the rhythm. Page, pause, page. Nothing else needed attention. Outside, the night continued quietly. Inside, the sound of turning pages became the only movement. Eventually, the page turned more slowly. Fingers lingered at the corner. The words no longer needed to be followed closely. The book could rest open or be gently closed. The sound faded, leaving behind a deep, comfortable quiet. The book stayed nearby, ready whenever it was needed again. You can imagine that soft sound now, pages turning gently, then settling into silence, as your thoughts slow and rest arrives, one quiet moment at a time. You've reached the end of the quiet shelf. The stories can rest now, and so can you. There's nothing left to listen for, and nothing left to hold on to. Everything that needed to be said has already settled gently into the quiet. If you're still awake, you can remain here for a moment longer, letting the calm linger. And if sleep has already arrived, you can drift easily, knowing the night is steady and kind. These stories will always be here, whenever you need a gentle place to land. A quiet shelf you can return to, again and again. For now, let everything soften. Let the silence hold you. Good night, and rest well.